Awesome, thank you. So welcome everyone. Today is February 4th, 2026, and I'm calling to order the meeting of the Cherry Hill Working Group at 7:04. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended again by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. I will now conduct a roll call to confirm that everyone's video and audio are working properly. Once I call your name and we can hear you, and you can hear us, just if you wouldn't mind muting, so that we don't get any static in the background. So I'm going to start with Sanjay.
I'm here.
Awesome. Ryan.
Here.
I think Sarah is still not here, right? Okay. Hillary.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Anurag.
Present.
And Dave is not here yet. Ray?
Dave is here.
Ray Harper's
Oh,
here.
is Dave here now? Sorry. Hey, Dave. Welcome. I'm using a script, so I'm just flashing back and forth, but nice to see you, Dave. Okay, can you hear us? Awesome. Okay. And then is Jose coming into the meeting today, Ray or David? Because I believe that he is in the attendees.
Jose will be in the attendees. He's not
Okay.
going to be on the panel unless we need
Okay.
to get him in.
No. And John is not here today as well, right?
Right.
Okay, perfect. All right. So a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be updated to the Town of Amherst YouTube channel. And also a reminder for folks in the audience that all materials that we discussed tonight can be found in the packet on the town's website. So I am going to begin tonight's meeting with a call for general public comment. And then we're going to move right into our discussion of our continuation and discussion of finances with the finance director, Sean Mangano. Sean, did I make sure you could be, I didn't make sure you could be heard, did I? You're good? Okay. All right. So if anybody would like to make public comment, this is the time to do that. So residents are welcome to express their views for up to 3 minutes based on the number of people who want to speak. The committee here is not able to engage in a dialogue, but we will certainly be listening closely. And so if you'd like, you can use the raise hand button and I will call on you in the order that you raise your hand. If you are coming in by phone, you can hit *9 and that will raise your hand. And right now we have 6 attendees. All right. So I am not seeing any public comment. As always, for attendees, you are welcome to send us comments by email, and we'll always have a period of public comment at our meetings. All right. Well, welcome, Sean. Thank you. Sean, for folks who don't know, is the town's finance director. And I've had the opportunity to work with Sean previously. He's wonderful. We're very lucky to have him and grateful for you to be here with us tonight, Sean. So we're going to begin by continuing this we started in the last meeting. In particular, we're going to discuss the highlighted questions that I sent out. And Ray, if you wouldn't mind bringing those up, that would be great. And Sean, let me just pass it over to you, and while we're pulling the questions, just to see if you have any sort of introductory comments or just overall, like how have you been taking in all of this with the work we're doing?
Yeah, I don't have any um, opinions or recommendations at this point. I think my hope was really just to help provide you all with information and my initial reaction to different ideas you may have, and then help you all, support you in whatever way you need to make your recommendations to the town manager. So I'm happy to go through those, run through the questions and see, stop after each one and see what questions there are, what discussion there may be. Um, but I'm happy that this group is meeting. I mean, this was something that was talked about 5 or 10 years ago, never really took off. And so I think it's a good thing that this group has finally come together and really thinking about the future of Cherry Hill.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, Ray's, I'm bringing those up. I think the question that we want to start with, that I'd like to start with, is related to the funding structure. And so could you outline what they're thinking
Michelle, you're breaking up a
the
little bit.
budget?
Is it's
Oh,
not me, right?
okay.
Is Michelle breaking up a little bit? Okay. Yeah, I think maybe try turning off your camera. It might help. I think it's your script, like your camera feed that keeps
Okay.
freezing.
Let's see.
I know what the first question is, but I'm going to wait till she comes back. So,
Are you able to hear me?
yeah, it's a little bit better. Do you want me to just start with the questions and kind of go through them and see what questions there are or response to those questions there is?
I apologize, folks. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Well, I hope this doesn't continue to be a problem. Sean, so let's just go ahead and, yeah, jump right
Okay.
into that first question.
Okay. So my understanding is one of your questions is you're talking about different strategies for increasing revenue at the golf course, and how, what options are there for essentially making sure that the golf course can take advantage of those higher revenues and that those revenues can be invested back into the golf course. Um, and sorry if any of this is, super redundant, but just to recap, the way it's currently set up is Cherry Hill is part of the general fund. Once upon a time, it was an enterprise fund, which means completely self-sustaining and separate from the general fund, its own little business. Other enterprise funds that we have are water, sewer, landfill, and parking. So those are all completely outside the general fund. Their revenues stay in that fund, and all the expenses associated with those activities stay in that fund. And that used to be Cherry Hill, but it hit some hard times at one point. And I don't know, Dave, you might recall more than I do, but it was decided that it was going to be taken out of an enterprise fund because it wasn't self-sustaining at that point. And I don't know exactly how many years ago that was, but it was before I started in the town. So right now, Cherry Hill is in the general fund. So whatever revenues it brings in, it contributes to our revenue side of the budget, of our overall town budget, and the expenses are budgeted on the expense side. If you bring in more revenues than what we budget, it doesn't contribute to the golf course. It just kind of contributes to our overall revenue picture for the general fund budget. And likewise, if you under expend the budget, those savings, you don't get to keep those in the golf course. That closes out at the end of the year to what we call free cash, which is sort of like the end of year surplus that the town has. So right now, there's really no mechanism for Cherry Hill to kind of take advantage of those higher revenues. The only way you could do it right now would be to advocate with the council, with the town manager, to essentially increase the appropriation each year that's in the general fund for Cherry Hill. There's a certain amount budgeted. We adjust that budget each year for things like salaries going up. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of adjustments to that budget. And so, one option you could pursue the way it's currently configured is to advocate for increases to the appropriation. Um, Honestly, I'll say it'll be challenging because there's a lot of demands on the operating budget of the town. Right now, it's going to be a challenging financial year because of health insurance increases and just managing inflation and salaries and things like that. So it's really hard to increase the budget in other ways. We don't generally have leftover money to do those kind of things, but it doesn't mean you can't advocate for it, and that can't be a recommendation. So that's the current configuration. If you wanted to kind of align the revenues with the expenses so that they were completely separate from the general fund, there's a couple options that I think could be available. So one would be to return to an enterprise fund, and that would require a vote of the council. It might require some preliminary approval by the state, which is not, I don't think that's a hurdle, but essentially they'd want to see proof that this can be a self-sustaining activity based on some track record of financials. And it could be pulled out of the general fund completely and put into the separate fund. And if that was the case, any revenues you make stay in that fund. So if we still budget it each year, just like the general fund, we come up with an annual budget that gets approved by council. But in that case, if it's an enterprise fund, any revenues that come in over budget fall to the retained earnings of the enterprise fund and can be available for supporting that enterprise fund in the future. And likewise, expenses, if you come in under budget while it's in an enterprise fund, those savings fall to retained earnings and can be used for that activity in the future. So that's sort of the most separate is the enterprise fund. There's an in-between option I think could exist, which is a revolving fund. We have a number of revolving funds. Our after-school program operates out of a revolving fund. Our aquatics program, we have a general recreation one, and there's different laws in the state that set certain rules for different revolving funds. And so the one that would be sort of aligned with what I think this committee is looking at is it's a section that's basically called other departmental revolving funds, which required bylaws to be created to dictate how that revolving fund would work. So if that revolving fund, let's say, turned out to be a suitable option, it would require creation of some bylaws that dictate how the revenues work, what types of expenses can be charged to the revolving fund. But if the revolving fund works similarly to an enterprise fund where revenues stay in the revolving fund. It could be used in the future to support that activity. So those are sort of the main options. So I forgot who was. Somebody submitted some questions about, could the council say, while Cherry Hill is in the general fund, could the council sort of issue some sort of guidance to the town manager that, if revenues come in over budget, that they get reinvested into the operating side. They could certainly sort of release that as guidance. It would still require the town manager to essentially bring that appropriation forward every year, and it would require the council to approve it. And the timing of something like that is challenging because when we're developing our budget, the year's not over. We're developing it in January, February, and March. So we wouldn't know how that current year's operations are performing. So in a situation like that, you'd almost have to look a year back to see how the prior full year finished. So there would be some challenges with something like that if you kept it in the general fund, but tried to come up with a way to reinvest it on the operating side. So I recognize that was a lot of information on different types of funds and municipal finance. And so I guess I'll pause and see if there's any follow-ups or clarifications needed.
Yeah, let's open the floor up now for questions. And there was an FAQ that it's in the packet for any attendees who are interested in learning more about these various funds. And hopefully members had a chance to look at that as well. So the floor is open for questions or comments. And Hillary, your hand went up first.
I guess I'm going to put you on the spot, Sean, and I know that because you've been with the town council before in your current role and gone away and come back again, that I feel comfortable putting you on the spot. What would you recommend? Because I think for all of us, we see the golf club as important and integral to the health of the Amherst community. So we all, from what I gathered from the last meeting, we all want to see it move forwards and gain in reputation and the number of people that are using it, etc. So
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the nice parts of my job is I get to reflect on a bunch of different perspectives. And so I'm going to give you two answers from different perspectives that are opposing to each other because
mhm.
that'll neutralize the answer. So if I was in your shoes and the intent was I wanted to align revenues with expenses, um, and you had a really solid foundation of information showing that this is fully, this is self-sustainable, um, then I would probably lean towards the enterprise fund option. I would say if your data is a little bit, it looks pretty good, but if you really add in all the costs and you're a little concerned that this could be self-sustaining long term, then I might lean towards the revolving fund option because that's a little less rigid than the enterprise fund, which is typically with enterprise funds, if you create them, the state wants you to stick with them for a certain period of time. And there can be some complexities if you have to dissolve it again. So that would be if I was in your shoes. I think the counter perspective to that right now is that the revenues of Cherry Hill are part of the overall revenue budget. And so if you were to pull those revenues out of the budget, that would essentially remove a revenue source from the general fund budget. Now you're moving some expenses out as well. So, there's some offsetting impact there. But that's just one wrinkle I could see there being questions on is, if you're going to remove these revenues, does that disadvantage any of the departments essentially that benefit from those revenues being part of the general fund? And again, there some years when the expenses and the revenues are very close, maybe it's not disadvantaging anybody, but I could just see that being an issue because of the way general fund revenues work.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I could ask a follow-up question, I guess, if no one else has their hand up.
No, you're good, Hillary. Go on.
Okay. I just feel that the only way we can really determine whether Cherry Hill should stay and stay with us as a golf course is to take it out of the general fund. It's too easy to hide stuff in the general fund. And I do feel that in order for the golf course to move forward and for a lot of the ideas that came forward at the last meeting to be able to be implemented, if I'm understanding what Michelle put forward with the different structures and information there, which was very useful. Thank you, Michelle. Then it needs to be standalone and we need to make it work as a standalone. Now, whether that's an enterprise or revolving, I don't know, but I do feel that the only way we can determine whether it's appropriate to maintain it as a golf course is for it to be standalone. So.
And I'll just add, I don't think you need to make that, whether it's a revolving fund or an enterprise fund.
Yeah.
I don't think your recommendation necessarily needs to be that specific. I think that,
No.
that's why town staff, could look into the different options. I think really the recommendation would be what you just said, Hillary, which is, do you want to pull it out of the general fund and track it separately so the revenues stay? I think if that's the recommendation, then that would be, that would give the direction to the town manager to research those other options.
Yeah. And I feel there are alternative funding routes that we could go for if it's sat outside of the general fund. And I just think that that's very constricting right now, potentially. So I'll shut up.
Hillary. Ryan.
Yeah, no, I just want to make the point. So, I mean, just to clarify, if we want to make it a revolving fund, it doesn't mean that it can't become an enterprise fund, 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. If the revolving fund is a little bit more forgiving and lenient, I think it will allow us to sort of have the more price discovery, information discovery, and sort of be more confident before making the transition to full enterprise fund, if that's eventually like what people want to do. But to me, it seems like that's a happy medium in the middle. I just had a question for you, Sean. How do capital expenses work between the revolving fund? Can you pass a bylaw where you can use the retained earnings to be put into capital improvements?
Yeah, so retained earnings would only be if you go the enterprise fund route. So if you go the enterprise fund route and you have retained earnings, you could budget capital as part of the enterprise fund budget. So, for example, in water every year, when we bring that budget forward, um, the council approves the operating expenses, the operating salaries, and also if there's any um, capital related to that. They also approve the fees. You probably see the water and sewer fee come up for approval every year, and they do that. If it's a revolving fund, it's really just what we call a fund balance. And in that departmental revolving fund structure, which again is this law that is sort of a catch-all for different revolving funds. All the other laws around revolving funds are very specific to the revolving fund itself, like after school or recreation. This other departmental is sort of a catch-all. So it really, I think, falls on the bylaws to dictate what can be appropriated out of that revolving fund. And so I think capital, when I read and I can share this with the committee if you haven't seen the revolving fund. There's a table that the state puts out of all the different revolving funds and what the rules are. I believe with a bylaw, you can appropriate capital out of that revolving fund.
And just in terms of time frame, is the revolving fund, would it be easier to get it through to a revolving fund versus an enterprise fund, or are they both about the same from a time frame perspective?
So what I can't estimate, and Michelle will probably know a lot about this, is how long it would take to create bylaws. That's not necessarily the quickest process. Likewise, create an enterprise fund might not be. So my gut says a revolving fund would be quicker, but the creation of the bylaws would be the part that I think could be a little, take some time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dave, I did see Chris's hand, but I think it went down, and Dave, you were next up.
It was a timing thing. Ryan answered. Ryan asked it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sean, a question about this chart. Greens and membership fees. I'm just wondering, can be kept intentionally low, because my initial assessment of the revolving fund versus enterprise fund is either option either option to me seems like we have to increase revenue. So
Yeah,
I
you'd want
struggle a
to,
little bit with that category saying can be kept intentionally low, because even if we move toward a revolving fund, I think for a lot of reasons we want to acknowledge and include as many of the real costs of the golf course operation as possible, including capital. So if we decide to recommend, or the committee decides to recommend, the working group recommended Paul to move toward revolving and maybe enterprise at some point, don't we need to really, keep in mind the capital needs? Because right now, if we were to just say, I don't believe Cherry Hill right now, the way it's operating, can absorb the capital costs. If we were to just snap our fingers and go to enterprise funds without an increase in revenue, I don't think we have enough money to break even year after year after year with the capital costs included. Maybe
yeah,
I'm
I don't know if
wrong,
I
but-
would. Yeah, I don't know if I would use that terminology, can be kept intentionally low, but I think maybe an alternative is that with a revolving fund, the bylaw can somewhat dictate what costs are charged to the revolving fund. So, for example, with our revolving funds, we don't often charge like retirement and benefits to revolving funds. However, if we were to set up an enterprise fund, we would. That's pretty typical for enterprise funds. With a revolving fund, it would likely be more of the day-to-day operating expenses that would be in there. And then to your point, you still need to cover those because you can't have a deficit in a revolving fund. So you still need to break even or possibly grow the balance so that you have funding available for capital in the future. So yeah, I think that wording you might want to tweak it a little bit, but I think the intent is that you might have a lower cost structure in a revolving fund than you would in an enterprise fund. And I think that's true, generally true of our revolving funds, like for rec versus what we set up for enterprise funds.
The other question I had
And
is,
to be clear, this is my wording, not Sean's. I just want to make sure that.
oh, okay. I wasn't
Yeah,
sure
that-
where this came from. Yeah.
Yeah, I put this chart together based on a bunch of research. So yeah, we can certainly tweak that, but I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that wasn't Sean's.
Other question, Sean, last question is, in an enterprise fund, when there's a cost overrun, how is that addressed by the town?
You would have to appropriate additional funds before you overran the cost. So, this actually happened recently. Our sewer fund was in, the projections show that the sewer fund wasn't going to make it with the appropriation that it had. And so the council appropriated from the sewer fund retained earnings because we had built up a good safety net in the sewer fund. They had appropriated additional funds to cover that. So you can't just overrun it in an enterprise fund. You can't just overrun it and kind of automatically pull the retained earnings. You do have to still manage it like with appropriations and with the council approval. But you could, if you had the retained earnings, you could go to council with an appropriation to cover those cost overruns.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Hillary.
Yes, just listening to that last exchange, I'm wondering under which model it would be easier to be able to apply for or appropriate to apply for external grants from whatever source was found, whether it was the Massachusetts Golfing Association, USGA, or whatever, and sponsorship for specific holes on the course and that sponsorship from local businesses could help offset the cost of refurbishment of those holes. So I don't know if one of those models suits or lends itself better to getting those external funds or not.
Yeah, I don't think when it comes to grants that it matters much really among our current configuration or the revolving fund or enterprise fund. If there's grants out there that we're eligible for, we could apply for them now and use them on Cherry Hill. And I don't, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's eligibility criteria that says it has to be structured a certain way generally. So I think the grant side, we could do it in any circumstance. On the sponsorship side, you would want it to be one or the other revolving fund or enterprise funds that those revenues go back to the golf course. The high school, the regional schools, for example, their school committee approved sponsorships. They had created a policy approving sponsorships for athletics. And the athletic department had, not a lot, but they did have some sponsorships that would go back into their athletic revolving fund. So I think under, again, the bylaws would dictate how it works for the revolving fund, but I think in either case, sponsorships could stay with the golf course under a revolving fund or an enterprise fund. But there would be, I don't at this point know what the town currently has approved to allow for sponsorship. So that would be a separate question is, are there any existing bylaws that allow for sponsorships? And if not, that would probably have to be established. Or at least we'd have to look at it with legal to see who makes that decision.
So I'm just going to jump in with some comments that I have. I think we're a long ways from an enterprise fund from my perspective. I think that we know from Ryan's report that he put together that we've been underfunding the course for some time. We have a lot of potential that we haven't, realized. And for me, even moving to a revolving fund, which I actually will just come out and say, I really do think this would be a good option. But it's even, a step. The part that concerns me the most is sort of the cultural aspect. And just really considering what the mission of this course is, the accessibility. It's an asset for our community. And so my concern with an enterprise fund is that it really sort of sets itself outside of that. And maybe there will be a time where we've have enough demand and we've seen, where it's really running well on its own. I think it's a bit of a stretch. And so, Sean, I guess when you mentioned that the recommendation to Paul, of course, Paul has the ability to make whatever decisions he would like, but I personally would want this committee to talk through what our strong recommendation would be, so that he would have that, um, you know, from the committee here. There wasn't really a question there for you, Sean, but I just I wanted to voice my
Yeah, and I just
thoughts on
want to
that.
I just want to say again, I'm trying not to provide any of my own recommendations now because I know you do all have to make it to Paul and it needs to be your recommendation, and then he may ask for. So I don't want to like skew hit what you all do before it gets to Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Hillary.
Okay, so I have one more question now based on what you just said, Michelle. And I know less about either of these funds than probably many people on the working group, but is it possible to run potential revenue models based on the figures that we've got already? One, as if it was becoming a departmental revolving fund, and one as if it's becoming an enterprise fund, and then determine and then see what the outcome is according to our current figures. Because we seem to have a lot of data for the last 5 or 6 years, and maybe it's possible to run a model through each of those according to the processes and requirements that would give us some concrete evidence as to which one might be better for the future.
I think, I mean, I would argue that like the revenue recommendations of the revenue side should be like when you say like model, like we should implement all of that stuff regardless. And I think that both options allow you to, one through bylaws, the other one is more sort of automatic, but it allows you to sort of put those revenues back into the course. I think that like really all that exercise would come down to is like, we would just be like raising prices even more, right? So like I think that's probably what it would just come down to, right? Greens fees. Like instead of raising greens fees like $6 to $8, you might have to raise them 12 or 15, and then you get into the affordability issues, which I think Michelle kind of touched on a little bit. But I think that just broadly increasing the revenue across recommendations, I think makes sense regardless. I think fit in both formats and can be used in both formats. I think one is just a little bit more forgiving, which is the revolving fund, as it kind of gets off the ground and we can kind of get a better sense of numbers and where the course is going.
And just so I understand, I want to make sure I understood Hillary's question. So, Hillary, were you asking if at this time there was a way to sort of run through what we currently have and like pretend as if we're going into either of these and then see kind of what that would look like? You're muted, Hillary.
Yes, that's my concept because, you know, looking at it on paper, talking about it theoretically, we might say, well, I think the revolving fund would suit us better. And it may be what Ryan says, anyway, forget that. But yes, I would just like to see if what would happen with all the current data if we ran it through as if we were an enterprise or a revolving fund. What would it look like with the current data that we have?
So, Sean, think about that for a second, if that's possible. And Anurag, I'm going to go to you. And you're muted.
Hi, thanks. I think it's a great conversation. I'm learning a lot, so I don't have any strong feelings about any of this because I'm just not grasping everything. But if how about if it has been underfunded for a couple of years, how about overfunding it for a couple of years and not separate that? Just keep it simple. Is that possible?
When you say overfunding, Anurag, do you mean keeping the
Like,
current structure in the general fund, but just increasing the appropriation?
yeah, just increase the appropriation for a couple of years and bring it even and just keep it running like the way it's running.
It is possible. I think it goes back to uh, if there's funding, if there is funding available to do that, I think is the struggle right now with the budget situation, sort of the general budget situation the way it is.
So,
Uh,
so can I just ask you, maybe I'm not fully understanding this. So if there are, you have so many different assets in town and you are investing in them every year to keep them up, and some part of the town doesn't get full funding for a couple of years, so it falls behind. Do you have a process to bring that department back to even?
I think it depends on what type of expense it is. So on the capital, if you're leaning more towards capital expenses, that goes, we set aside a certain percentage of our tax levy for capital each year. We set aside 10% for capital. And the process for determining how capital funds get allocated, all the departments in town submit requests. We look at those requests, we look at our plan, we have a 5-year plan, so we look at what was on the plan for the prior year. And we work through the Joint Capital Planning Committee to essentially build a capital plan. So on the capital side, it's possible Ray could submit a bunch of Cherry Hill capital requests, for example, to kind of make up for maybe underfunding the capital side for a decade, and that would go through a process. It would still be on the town manager to essentially prioritize that over other needs, roads, school capital, other. There's a lot of competing needs. So it would require the town manager to prioritize it over other capital needs, and then it would require the council to still approve it.
Okay.
So is it possible? Yes. But there's a very deliberate process to develop the capital plan. On the operating side, let's say, you wanted to add staffing or additional extra help to the budget that's already there. The way our budget works is we have 4 major town operating budgets. We have the town, which includes general government, police, fire, recreation, which includes Cherry Hill. Then we have the elementary schools, the regional schools, and the library. And so the way we allocate funds every year in the operating budgets, we give a certain percentage increase to those cost centers at a high level. So for FY27, for example, we're projecting a 3.5% increase to the town operating budget, the first one I mentioned. Then the town manager has to look at all the cost increases for all the departments that fall under that operating budget, which there's many, and allocate those funds accordingly. So again, it would require the town manager to prioritize sort of adding something new to Cherry Hill, which might mean cutting. Something else might need to be cut in order to allow that to happen. The first thing we do is, we budget for contractual salary increases, we budget for health insurance, we budget for all the things that are contractual. And to be honest, there's not much money left over once we budget for all the contractual things. So again, it's possible, but it would require that prioritization by the town manager each year.
Thanks.
I think also like something that we could, because Sean sort of mentioned like with benefits, right? Like even if we left out, like if I model out the revenue recommendations out 5 years and the cost recommendations out 5 years from last meeting, and then we like say that we leave out benefits for like the first 3 years or something, that gives the golf course a significant amount more of money, if that makes sense. So you could probably do it. You could sneak in a recommendation through the bylaws via the revolving fund to give the course intentionally a little bit more money to make up for some of the underfunded, nature. And my guess would be that would be an easier way to do it, where just be like, okay, the benefits for the next 3 years, will be on the town, and then the golf course picks it up after 3 years. And then that gives the golf course more breathing room to be able to reinvest maybe. If that.
Thank you, Ryan. I see Sanjay's hand.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. A question actually for Ryan, if you don't mind, Ryan, because I know you did all that analysis. If we look back 5 years, a period during which I think the golf course has been running an operating surplus, do you know whether if you throw in the capital expenditures during that period, do we get to break even? Are we still at surplus or are we at a net deficit? I hope the way I'm phrasing the question is clear.
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
think it's
there were any. Were there, Ryan? Were there any capital expenditures in those years?
no, well, between 2018 2023 there were none, it looked like. And then we had some 23, 24. So I think that, like, to answer your question, Sanjay, at least from what I could tell, I think it flips back and forth a
Yeah.
little bit, but it's not meaningfully negative from an OpEx perspective or positive. And I think, you know, one of the reasons we didn't touch on the last meeting for why that was probably the case is Hickory Ridge closed down, so Cherry Hill got more of those golfers, and then, you know, the whole revenue picture turned around after that, I think, a little bit. But it strikes me like it hasn't been running, you know, when I look back at the numbers, and I can send you an email, I can send you from what I can deduce for that. But it doesn't look like it's meaningful positive or negative in either direction.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, and Sean as well. Maybe Sean's answer was as telling as the other.
Well, and just quickly going to what Hillary asked earlier, I think Ryan has all the information
Yeah.
that you guys need to answer that question. Um, you know, the revolving fund, Ryan, is going to look very much like the expenses that are already in the operating budget, which don't include benefits or retirement. So that revolving fund model would look similar to the operating expenses that are already being charged to Cherry Hill. And then the enterprise fund model would be what you looked at for benefits and retirement. But I think you have that data sort of already at hand to model that out.
Sean, could I keep
Yes, of
going a
course.
bit? Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief, but I want to put a few comments out into the record, especially as we might eventually move towards some decision making later in this meeting. You know, with respect to capital and operating expenses, I think those of us who pay attention in town are used to being told that those are very different things, and that they are non-fungible with one another. And as an example, I sit on the Recreation Commission as well, and we hear about applications for CPA funding, Community Preservation Act funding, in the recreation tranche. And you know, there's a significant request in for a new building at War Memorial Pool right now, a capital expenditure. And so I just want to say that as we talk about break even at Cherry Hill, like whether and how to include capital expenditures, it's a subtle question that to which there is not a definitive answer. And I would like to see Cherry Hill treated the way that other recreational departments and facilities are in the town of Amherst. So I'm going to actually repeat that part. I would like to see Cherry Hill treated similarly or the same way that other recreational facilities are in the town of Amherst. Just a couple of more things. There has been at various times, I hear this, that Cherry Hill, quote, loses money. I have come to understand that in the past, that was sort of true, right? That there was an operating deficit. That over the past few years, it has not been true with respect to expenses and revenues balance, but that expenses have exceeded budgeted expenses. And so I really hope that we can very clearly express that whenever anybody talks about the revenue situation at Cherry Hill, what needs to be compared are revenues and expenses. And then we need to have a conversation about capital, right? But that exceeding budgeted expenses is not bad if increases in revenues exceed the overage of expenses, right? To put this even more precisely, from an operating expenses perspective, if Cherry Hill were to cease operations today, it would cost the town money. And so I'd like to just sort of have that said out loud. And I think, Michelle, those are the things I want to say for the moment.
Thank you. Great. Sean, I have a question about general fund support in the revolving model. So I think you were talking about bylaws. If Cherry Hill was, you know, profiting, is there a way in which it can provide support? Like, can the town charge a fee to the revolving fund, for example, or something like that?
Yeah. So that would be one way to maybe address some of the concerns about pulling it out of the operating budget would be to charge the revolving fund an indirect cost fee. The recreation revolving fund does that currently. So Ray's fund that manages most of the recreational programs in town. When it does well, it pays an indirect cost fee back to the town operating budget, which supports the revenues of the operating budget. So what that fee is and how much it is would have to be discussed, but that is an option. And it's to reflect all the administrative services that are provided to the fund.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's a really important advantage of this. So that's good to know. What other questions do we have while we have Sean here and just focusing again right now? I mean, we there are lots of questions that came in, and so we're trying to work through the questions in order of, priority so that we can, set ourselves up well right now. And not seeing any hands, I would like for Sean, I asked Sean if he could give a brief overview to the members about the budget cycle, because not all of us understand the way that the budget cycle works. And so if in our next topic tonight, and by the way, Sanjay, to just sort of answer the comment you had earlier, we will not be taking any action at this meeting tonight unless somebody else tells me differently. I was expecting this to stay in full discussion mode until our next meeting. But we will begin to frame some possible short-term recommendations that we will want to bring to the town manager. So we have the option to create an interim report that we will pass to the town manager. And based on Ryan's report and sort of the low-hanging fruit that we talked about, and we're going to get to that in a minute, I would love for Sean just to give us a bit of a overview of how the budget cycle works so we know what we can expect in terms of short, medium, and long-term recommendations that this committee makes.
Yeah. So one of the first parts of the budget process is the setting of budget guidelines by the town council. If you wanted to do anything that, let's say, made it into budget guidelines from the town council, which go to the town manager to inform how he develops his budget, you would want to get those to the council probably in October. They start drafting their budget guidelines in November at the finance committee, and then the town council adopts them in December. So, this would be in a world where you're looking out a couple of fiscal years, but if there was something you wanted to do within the general fund budget and you wanted it to be in budget guidelines, you would want to get that information to the council for likely October. The budget development itself, so those guidelines come out in December, the town manager and his department heads start developing their budgets, developing them all on the way, but really dig in January and February. The town manager is required to present his budget to the council by May 1st. So from January till May, that's when the town manager is developing the budget. There's a lot of steps that go into that. So I would say if you wanted to provide a recommendation to the town manager that you wanted reflected in the upcoming budget cycle, you'd want to get it to the town manager sooner than later, because I'd say once we get to late March, April, it's really about kind of pulling everything together. It's really hard to necessarily factor in something brand new at that point. So the town manager has to present that budget again, sort of release his official budget by May 1st, and then it goes through finance committee and the town council and gets adopted in June. So all that would be for things if you wanted to see them in the FY27 budget, which starts July 1 of 26. Similarly, capital, if you had recommendations around capital. So the town manager prepares a capital plan. That capital plan has to be presented to the town council by May 1st, similar to the operating budget. There's a joint capital planning committee that's meeting, that's going to be kicking off shortly. But same thing, if there's any capital requests, you'd want to get those to the town manager sooner rather than later for consideration in the capital plan, because he would have to include that in that final package. Fees, I know you're talking a lot about fees, so we just sent out all of our fees to department heads. That departments are sort of the liaisons, for those fees, and so they've submitted requests to change them or keep them the same for next year. I think you probably want to follow that same cycle. If you have a strong recommendation around fee changes for next year, it'd be good to get those to the town manager. I'd say, sometime in March, early March, if possible. If you're not going to change anything structurally for next year, if the recommendation is to change anything structurally for next year, it's just to modify fees. I think some of it, Ray, we'd have to talk about, because if you wanted those fees to go into effect for like the spring golf season, then that would sort of, that would actually have to go be approved earlier than the regular budget. And then the enterprise fund, I think it would take at least a whole year to get that set up. So I think it's likely too late if you were to make that recommendation for that to go into effect July 1st. I think we would need at least a year of planning and kind of a transition. If you were to propose a revolving fund, again, that recommendation would have to get to the town manager very soon as he's developing the budget, because that would impact what revenues we're budgeting. It would impact what expenses we're budgeting on the expense side. It would require a lot of work by the council. So I think doing anything for this July 1st is going to be a challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be a challenge just because there's a lot of steps for each of these possible recommendations. I know that wasn't super succinct on the budget process. Any questions on, I think essentially recommendations, if you want something to possibly go into effect for July 1st, we would want them, in late February, early March, for them to possibly go into effect.
Thank you, Sean. That's super helpful. Any questions for Sean about that? Okay. All right. Well, I'd love to let Sean go unless folks have additional questions for him right now. If not, then we're going to move into the second part of our agenda, if that's okay with everyone. And I know, Sean, you're readily available usually, so we can certainly circle back. Dave
Thank
or
you.
Ray, any other questions for Sean before he leaves? Okay. Thank you so much, Sean. It was great to have you here. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
All right. I am going to share my screen again. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. Okay. These are possible short-term recommendations. So we're moving into the next part of our agenda, which is to have a discussion, and this discussion will be as simple as that. We're beginning to think about, based on the budget cycle that Sean just outlined for us, what we might be able to get through. None of these are, we may get none of them. We may get one or two. And, the idea here is for this body to debate, discuss, and potentially vote on these items. This list can be added to, subtracted from, debated. I just put it together to get us started, and it's really based on Ryan's reporting and the items that were sort of low-hanging fruit. And so before we go into any of the specifics, is there just generally any comments about this process and the ways in the way in which we will move forward from here, to get us by our next meeting to a point where we could take some action on these and then start writing up a report? Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like very integral to the golf course that we get this through by July. So like, I'm happy to like whatever, if it, in terms of like modeling out what we need to do to present a strong argument for this, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like almost everybody's on board with kind of going with the departmental rotation, like revolving fund route. And I think that, like, to me, that's like very integral to how the golf course operates. And to let it slip for another full 12 months, I think doesn't really make much sense. If all it means on our end is getting it, through this process, maybe 2-3 weeks quicker or something, like I'm happy to pick up that work if that's what it means. Like, that's pretty, just putting together some sort of proposal that we can then vote on next meeting. I think that, especially if we want to couch it in like a strong recommendation that this is what we believe too, then I think that maybe that carries more weight, as you kind of said. Just because I think that, having to go another 12 months, I think that's kind of crazy to me with how the golf course is running right now. I think that needs this to happen as soon as possible. And if that's July 1, then I think that makes the most amount of sense.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah. And, I think if we can stay on a at least every 2-week meeting schedule, we could, at our next meeting, spend the entire time, really discussing each of these. And then it would be from that point, just putting a report together, which I could work with one other member. It sounds like Ryan would be willing to work with me on that. And we could put a report together that then this body would approve and send off to the town manager. Any other just general like process questions? And it's 8 o'clock right now, so we actually do have a little time. I wasn't sure how much time we would have, so I want to be a little bit more spacious in that. Yes, Hillary.
Yes, I think these are great short-term recommendations, and I think it would be very important when we work through these in terms of percentages, in terms of greens fee, membership fee increases, that there is something for the public to understand, to grab hold of, if you like, that shows what else we're going to be put in place on the medium and long term end of these, so that they can see why it's important that these fees and increase now in order for the golf course to be retained, but also what else we might be seeing for the future, whether that is the sponsorship, the grants, the expansion of the course operation. And I think that is another critical thing that should take place for the coming season. And for us to think about walking before we run in terms of concessions and the expansion of the drink offerings, and not, but also to build in there that yes, we are looking at potentially getting a full drinks license, at potentially getting the opportunity to be selling some hot food, so that people have something to feel that their money is going to be used for purpose for the golf course. And I would be happy to explore, not necessarily the local business sponsorships. I don't know the local businesses at all. I haven't been here long enough for that. But just exploring some grants that might be available. And I don't, so I've got some experience of that from back in Wales, so I'm happy to explore that a bit, so that people can say, oh, look, wow, grant applications here or there, and this is what's going to be happening. And I just think we're in an environment right now where people need to have positive things to be looking forward to, and be able to hang things on a hook that make them want to continue to be part of something that they've done before. So
Thank you, Hillary. Chris, I'm going to go to you, and I just want to say that I forgot to include on this list the software management system, which I think was a short-term, Ryan, when we spoke, I said it out loud, but it didn't make it onto the list. So I'll go ahead and add that as a possible recommendation as well. Chris.
And I mean, we haven't really talked golf course yet, and I know we're not there yet, but I think I mean, I know with the golf courses that I'm a member at, like we all know our fees go up, but we also like seeing work put back into the course itself. So money that, would be allocated for John, or, I'm just saying, just as an example, these don't have to be like tree work, like, greens, sandbox improvements, stuff like that. It's like that sort of stuff. If my fees are going to go up, I expect it, but I also like to see something put back into the overall project. So I mean, the only thing that was tough with with Ryan, not Ryan, if we stay where we are, if we bring in more money, we can't put it back into the golf course.
Exactly. Ray, is there any update that you would like to share about information on the software management system at this time?
Nothing. We don't have anything particularly useful here right now. We have spoken to one management company and got some information. I know we're trying to get the full financial package from them as to what it's going to cost us. We also reached out to a second company. We're starting to shop with the information we got from one company.
Can I just? So I actually was just.
Ray, yeah, and Ryan was involved in this conversation too. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my understanding is, so we put it out to two different places. They both came back almost identical at $5,600 per year for this thing, which is kind of right where I'd priced it. Like I priced it like 5,000, I think, which is what we were thinking. So it's maybe $600 more, but that includes a website that's year round, that has basically the booking infrastructure on the website where people pay for the tee times up front. It has all the business analytical software. It has marketing stuff, marketing tools that we can use. It has like the tee sheet stuff that we need. It has all of sort of the point of sale stuff. It would actually come in, both of them would save us. One would save us a little bit more on our processing fees with credit card fees. One would save us about $1,500. One would save us about $1,000. So like net of costs, it would be like $4,500, if that makes sense. They're both going to save us from a point of sale perspective on our processing fees versus what currently happens with Square. And they both kind of came in right at the same level. So it would just be more about, whatever Jose prefers or whatever, Ray prefers in terms of like ease of use and whatever system they preferred. But both seem like kind of no-brainers to me from an operational perspective.
And does that 4,500 include a setup, like the initial setup, or is that does?
Yeah. And both of them, I know that both of them said that in order to get, like, they would want, if we wanted that for the start April 1, they would want to start implementing them like middle of February. So like in the next couple of weeks, because it takes 6 weeks for them to sort of become familiar with stuff and do training where they need to, and to guarantee that we would have it up and running for April 1st. But, I think that is a no-brainer, and there are other mechanisms that they offer where you can bypass if the budget becomes an issue where we can't find $4,500 for whatever reason to spend on this, or $5,000 to spend on this, and this would be more a question to Ray. I mean, they give you options where you can basically just trade tee times and give them revenue that way, so it's off budget, where 50% of the muni courses they work with will trade tee times with them, and you come to an agreement where instead of us paying for this, they just take, 2 foursomes a week. Now, what I will say is I've looked at those numbers and it's not as cost effective. So, they're getting the better end of the deal there by a couple $1,000s, but it also means that we don't have to stick it in the budget if that's, if that's a big impediment.
We thought that the swapping out for the tee times would be what we had to go to when we first started the conversation, and now we're evaluating whether or not that makes sense. Ryan's correct there that it doesn't necessarily make all the sense in the world based on the tees they're asking for, and there is a hardware issue about getting set up. There's also a training issue. and we think that we're in a good place to make an objective decision on those, but it's too early for us to know for sure that's I can't tell you that we're pulling the trigger yet on it.
Well, what would be the reason not to, I guess?
There's like I said, the training piece. We think that we can absorb the frustration. It may be more work for our management team, for Jose particularly, to work to correct any operator errors on it. It's not something that's perfectly intuitive for the clubhouse staff that we have going through there. So we'd have to train and follow up and make sure that it's not more work on the front end. Eventually, it would take care. At worst, we're looking at a year where we have to try and get a new system to become familiar.
I mean,
But
this
in
is
terms
like
of the investment, we're on the verge of trying to figure out whether or not this is that if we can make it work, we think that we're in a place where we can make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know if Jose's on the call or if Jose can jump in. It would be helpful to maybe hear from Jose on this, but I mean, my understanding is that this takes they have 2 training sessions on this, right? And it's actually easier for people to operate. It's another point of this software, right? It's easier for people to sort of see tee times, for the clubhouse staff to see the tee times. The point of sale stuff is right in front of them. The system's easier, right? So if it's providing more ease of operation, there should be a push to do this, right? There shouldn't be organizational resistance to it. It should be yes, we need this. We should go for this, right? I would, unless there's strong logical reason not to, from a cost perspective, it seems like this is something that we should be all cylinders firing forward on, but that's
Let's leave that just for now, and I think that they're doing some good work on that, and we can follow up this week to see what support, if any, this committee can have for you, Ray, in working through that decision. I saw Chris's hand was up, okay, down, and Hillary. You're
Yes.
good. You're
Yeah,
unmuted.
okay. I wondered, have you reached out to other golf courses to see what systems they're using, how they use them, the cost effectiveness of those systems? I think it's really important when we're starting from the place that we are, that we actually engage with other golf clubs and see, many of them are just moving into a similar sort of golf management system. And so it'd be nice to know what the hiccups are that they had that maybe we can avoid, what was the best system for them. So that's just basically a question.
Two-part response there. The first part is we know internally that if we're comparing it to the booking system that we have right now, we already know that there's advantages. The booking system we have right now is weak in terms of connecting with other courses. Yes, we are looking at other courses and how they've implemented the initial software we're looking at is used at other golf courses around. So yes, my team has reached out to get information on those.
Hillary, just further to that, my understanding too is that Amherst Golf Club just implemented one of the ones that we're looking at last year, and they didn't give us specifics, but they said at least the sales rep claimed that this was close to 6 figures in additional P&L that they were able to drive from this system, right?
Yeah.
So that would jive with the numbers that we had, which were 26. I think I had 26 to 60,000, but my guess is Amherst Golf Club has more volume. So to me, that makes sense from an efficiency perspective. And both of the companies, I know both of the companies have examples of golf courses in our area that use them and can provide, those contacts and testimonials and stuff too. So I think, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay. That's great. I mean, as a member of Amherst Golf Club, I know Golf Genius was the one that they implemented, and they implemented it at the lowest level possible because most of our members are, without putting too strong a word, kind of illiterate on or Philistines in terms of booking online. They've trained us very well in terms of picking the phone up or going to the golf course to make our bookings. So it's been a tough transition for many members. So Chrono Golf is the one we've used for the online booking, and then Golf Genius is the one that Sean has been implementing for competitions. So I don't know who you spoke with at Amherst, but George Ulanson, as chair of the board, seems to have a pretty good handle on this. I know Sean is kind of on leave right now down in Florida, but is readily accessible. So depending on who you spoke to, rather than just relying on the reps for either of these particular online services, I think it's good to go to the people who are on the front line there. So, and maybe that's who you went to. I don't know.
Um, Heard, thank you, Hillary. And I think that is, uh, uh, yeah, I don't want to make it sort of a response for Ryan before. Our urgency is there because the program, the software that we have is it's not sufficient. It's not built for what our purposes are. We know it's a whole. The reason why I can't give an automatic stamp right now is because we're still a day or two after sifting through some of that information, and those questions about following up have to be on the table for me before I can say that this is something we're going to make the conversion over to. There is some of that. The software itself is promoted as being user friendly, and I don't doubt that. But we also have a group that maybe I want to make sure that before we pull the trigger on it, which could be tomorrow for all I know, it could be that we have to delay more before we get more information. But that is, we need to know that it's not going to be it's not going to create more work for the overtaxed folks that are above the system there, which I'm optimistic will happen.
Yeah.
So, Ray, I have a question. And I want to make sure that we stay in our lane and appropriately. So, I just added this now to the list because I just remembered that it was something we talked about last time. Is this actually a decision that is there a recommendation that would even be required from this committee in terms of this, or do you have the full capacity within your department and as the head of that department to go ahead and make that decision? I mean, obviously, I know you're listening to our thoughts about it, but I just want to make sure. Yeah.
I do have the authority to make the purchase. My staff and my management team, we have the ability to make that purchase. We could have done that a month ago. We could have done that ahead of this working group. That's not something that we need a recommendation for the town manager to make a purchase here. I will, what Michelle was just saying there, yes, we are. I hear both of those two perspectives. Ryan saying that there's an urgency here, it makes sense. I hear, and that's something that I know Jose and Marion and sitting on the calls, and John sitting on the calls here this week, that they've been dealing with some of that. We've been rushing this to try and get the information because there is an urgency to try and get this in a timely fashion. And also, I hear Hillary saying, don't jump into it and not do the research and make sure it's connected. I hear all of that. It's we have been having conversations all week about this because it's become sort of at the forefront of our Cherry Hill planning process here. So yes, we do have the ability. This is not have to be tied intimately into the larger Cherry Hill working group picture. But I hear both of those ends.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, I see Sanjay's hand and Dave's hand. Sanjay.
Let's let Dave go.
Okay, I was gonna do that, but I thought, you know what, Sanjay's gonna do it for me. Dave.
Thanks, Sanjay. Real quick, I'm looking at the time too. I don't want to contradict what Ray just said, but I don't see any harm with the working group recommending this because it's linked to increased revenue. So the decision on what software package to use is clearly Ray's decision, and members of this committee who have expertise in that and want to talk with him, by all means do that. But I hear consensus on the group that this is a priority for the recreation department to move forward on it. So I think, if you recommend it, that's even more backing for Ray, because it is linked to finances. It is linked to increased revenue for the course over time. So that's all I want to say.
Just to respond really quickly, we could make a decision. I only say that it's not it's not the responsibility of the Cherry Hill Working Group here, because in terms of timing, we make that decision before the working group's final decisions to put forward. It should be part of it that I'm hoping. My optimism is that by the time the working group put it in the working group recommendation, it sounds like there's consensus that this is an important piece of our revenue picture. I'm hoping that we'll be able to say to that, done. We've already taken care of it. This is already on the table.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Sanjay.
Thanks, Michelle. First, a quick aside. There were 2 cross-country ski teams practicing at Cherry Hill today, and there have been 17 consecutive days of groomed skiing at Cherry Hill. So just to remind us that we're talking about more than golf, that's my 30 seconds. To return to golf, this idea of trying out
your plug that you give at each meeting.
It's my role. So to return to golf, right? With regard to software, we got to give it a shot. I really like being able to reserve a tee time for myself to play solo, but that is not the way a golf course should run. And so we got to try something different. And it won't be perfect, and it'll be annoying, and it'll have bugs in it, and some people will have to call and this and that, but we just got to try it. We just got to try it. So that's my comment on that. I have a question regarding one of the other items on the list, Michelle, which is, and I don't know if this is for Ray or Dave, or it might even be for John, but what is the barrier to longer opening hours? Earlier opening in the daytime and longer into the fall and earlier into the spring. And I ask this question knowing that Cherry Hill is severely understaffed. And so I would just like to know what the barriers are to more golfing hours and days.
For brevity's sake, it's the extra helpline. It's our staffing. 2 more weeks in November. The way we're structured right now, with the extra helpline that we have, it's exhausted by the time we get to November, when it's, again, given our current structure, is mostly free golfers. It's mostly members on free golf, and so to staff the clubhouse and to keep the grounds crew there for 2 more weeks or for more hours of the day, it doesn't make financial sense for us.
So when I did the analysis, I didn't see that was like, it's definitely, you do have a proportion of it that are free golfers, but it's not all free golfers. Like you're turning a profit. The golf course is turning a significant profit those last 2 weeks of October. I think that the issue though is, to your point, Ray, that there is a staffing issue here where, like, John, if you talk to John, about this, like, this would have to be with the understanding that if we were able to get this revolving fund through in July, that then we were able to give him more part-time help to then, get the clubhouse maybe more part-time help, where then it becomes feasible. And I think even if, like, I modeled that in to, like, the cost and the revenue assumptions where you're paying more for part-time, help, you're paying more to make this a reality. But I think that, like, that it would depend on, John getting a little bit more help, I would say. And I think that, opening earlier, I think would probably be the same thing. But, if it's one of those things where John's not there, I don't know how integral that is, that John would have to answer that if he's there at, 7, or if he needs to do things. I don't know what his daily schedule looks like to make an opening at 7 versus 8:30 realistic? And I don't know what the constraints are on the clubhouse for that also in terms of labor availability and stuff like that.
All right, awesome. So if there aren't any other just general comments, I want to stop us here on this short-term recommendation list so that we can sort of prepare ourselves to move into the next meeting and be ready to take some action after we're having, discussion. So just looking at the list, I think that based on just what I'm sensing, I think that the increases in greens fees especially is going to be a conversation that's going to take us a little time. I think that the dates and times of the course operation, and if there's anyone that we would want to have at that meeting, Ray, it would be wonderful if we could invite those people to give us insight so we can make informed decisions. And so if there aren't any other questions on that, I'm sort of just gave, that would be the framing for our next meeting. So I'd love before Sanjay has to leave, if we could decide on a next meeting date and time. And then I do not have any items that I didn't anticipate. And I do not have minutes for us, but I will have minutes for both of our this last meeting and this one at our next meeting. So if what I mentioned last time that 2 weeks from now is falling into February vacation week, and I'm not sure, Ray, how that impacts you, if at all, and anyone else, Sanjay, anyone else that it would
I'm a no for
impact
I'm a no for that whole week.
for that whole week? Okay.
Yep.
And we don't have Sarah here either. What would it be like to meet next week on the 11th, given our time constraints? We may be able to back off a little bit once we get past this short-term recommendation, get that up to the town manager, then we might be able to kind of slow down again. But would the 11th be a possibility?
Well, not for me. So I think we're actually meeting tonight because I was not available next week.
Okay. So you're not available, Sanjay, the 11th or the 18th?
I'm not available the 11th, and I'm not available the entire week of vacation week.
Okay.
This doesn't mean the committee shouldn't meet, right?
Yeah, but let's try to do our best.
But that's my availability.
Okay. Are you available any other night next week?
Yep. Thursday, the 12th would work.
Yeah.
How is the 12th for, I
That
see
works
Dave's
for me.
hand up. Dave,
Yeah.
okay.
I cannot promise the 12th.
Okay. Well, we need you, Ray.
12th or 13th will be a no-go for me.
Okay.
And so I won't know until probably not until Monday, whether it'll be Thursday or Friday.
10th.
Okay.
10th.
No.
The 10th, Dave?
10th, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my one suggestion, I know Sean outlined process for us a little bit, but I think there's an opportunity. I mean, Ray has frequent meetings with the town manager, so not to preempt your recommendations at all, but I think there's an opportunity for Ray during one of his regular meetings with the town manager to simply say, here are the 5 or 6 recommendations that the working group is considering. I want you to be aware of all 6 of these. And, I think we have a general sense of this group. We may not know you want to go up in greens fees by $3 or $33, but you're talking about an increase there. You're talking about an increase in membership fees. You're leaning toward a revolving fund, not an enterprise fund. So I think, I guess I just wanted to offer that it's not an absolute that you get your recommendations done. I also think we need to come really prepared for that next discussion. What is, do you want Ray to come with a recommended, I know Ryan's budget work had some recommended numbers in there. So I think Ray's team should really consider that and come in with, do you agree with those numbers? Do we go up X or Y? So I'm just offering that I think there's something to help plant the seed with Paul that here's the direction the working group is going. It's not finalized, but it doesn't mean you have to meet next week. I'm trying to give you a little bit of wiggle room here, a little bit of breathing room.
That's very helpful, Dave. And Sanjay, I know you have to go, so I want to give you the floor again.
Thanks, Michelle. Just real quick, just to be clear, Dave, like just speaking for myself, if it came to a vote, I'm not prepared to support any fee increase until we hear some statement from, I'll say, the town, right? That increased revenue will be fed back into the golf course. And that doesn't need to be some revolving fund or enterprise fund or binding this or town resolution that. But with the golf course currently running a surplus, operating surplus, personally, I would not be prepared to support any increase in fees without some assurance that increased revenue would go back into the golf course. So I think there's more discussion to be had about some of these things before there's consensus amongst the working group.
Oh, that's fair enough. If I could just respond, that's fair enough. But you as a group, we as a group won't know that for months. So it may be a decision you or other members need to make to say, I either vote against that or abstain because,
Absolutely. And so I'm just getting out on the table
Yeah.
that I will vote against fee increases until we receive some such assurance, even if that means deferring that until a discussion for next year. Just so that Ray is not in a position of conveying something to Paul as the consensus of the group when in fact it's not.
I think I think what Dave said was not to convey the consensus. I didn't hear that.
Okay.
I heard
These are
just
being
saying
considered.
these are
Good. Thanks, Dave. Sure. I understand, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with the mind, what about the 20th? Can you, okay. That connection and stable again, I think. Can you?
Losing the connection.
Okay, how are we now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, how is the 25th of February? Give me a thumbs up if that works. Same time, 7 to 8:30. Okay, Chris? Anurag. And Dave, that look okay for you? That's in the middle thumb. Okay. All right. Well, yes, Hillary.
Is it possible to get the minutes prior to the meeting? I find it much better for me personally if I can read those minutes and make notes on them before we have the meeting.
Absolutely. That is my commitment. Yes. Bye, Sanjay. Yes, Hillary, I'm working on that and I'll make sure that you get them. Okay. All right. So it looks like we'll be meeting again on the 25th from 7 to 8:30. Ryan, you gave a thumbs up on that, right? That works for you? Okay, awesome. And Anurag, I saw yours. Okay. So if there aren't any other comments or questions, I am going to adjourn the meeting at 8:32 p.m. And thank you to everyone. Really great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.